I'm Steve Conroy. I'm a professor of economics here at University of San Diego, and in my spare time, faculty director of the Center for Peace and Commerce. So I'm really excited to be here today. It's great to see the good turnout, and I think there are going to be people filing in as we go. Help yourself to the food, of course. We have today discussion about one of the most important subjects in this area of social innovation and social entrepreneurship, which is social and environmental impact. So what is the impact of a particular project or business idea? How many of you, just a show of hands, are considering or have already put a project up on our platform to enter into the Social Innovation Challenge? All right. Whoa, that's awesome. Our applications have been way down this year, and at the same time, the money has gone up. So that's good for you if you're thinking about putting up a project. We have $50,000 this year to give away, and so we're pretty excited about that. And today's Idea Lab is part of a series. We're the fifth of the 7 Idea Labs that are trying to help kind of get you thinking about social innovation and helping you get projects ready to go for that. We have, this year, expanded because of the success of the Social Innovation Challenge. And by the way, when I say applications are down, it's true, but they're generally low at this time of year. But we've only got till March 3rd, the deadline for round 1 applications. But this year, we've expanded the Social Innovation Challenge to include these other universities in San Diego, 4 other universities. You may have heard of UC San Diego. You may have heard of San Diego State University and Point Loma and City College, San Diego City College. These are the 4 partner universities that we have partnered with, so we were very intentional about going out and trying to work with these other universities as we got a grant from Moxie Foundation. So Moxie Foundation has supported us financially and many other ways as well, and having a $17,500 prize right now for students from those other universities. The good news for you, how many of you are from USD? Okay, so the good news for the USD students is our pot of money is $50,000. The rest of San Diego is going to be competing for the 17.5, and we're trying to bump that up a little bit so that there's a little bit more money for those folks. But we're just rolling out a pilot project with them. I mentioned a minute ago, round 1, March 3rd deadline. It's very easy to apply, actually. You have to answer 5 questions, and our speaker today, Hanna, one of the 2, was actually instrumental in setting up these questions, from what I understand. And we brought these in from the Dell Social Innovation Challenge, which is probably the biggest one still, and which was affiliated with the University of Texas at Austin. So there are 5 questions, and Grace Michael, who's our what are you now? Project coordinator, sorry, thank you. Used to be an intern, but she's graduated now with a U.S. degree. So she is our project coordinator, is going to help walk you through the steps to register your project.
Hi, everyone. I just want to make sure that everybody here knows what they need to do if they want to apply for the Social Innovation Challenge. So you go to our platform, which is sandiego.dellchallenge.org, and it's going to show up like this. And here it's got all our news. Right now you can see the news is the Idea Lab that's happening today. And all you have to do is click on Get Started, and it's going to tell you a little bit about the Social Innovation Challenge. Maybe today is your first time hearing about the Social Innovation Challenge. I'm not going to exhaust you by explaining it today because we have other juicy content to get into, but you can read on the platform all about it and who can enter, and then get started by creating a profile. And all you have to do is enter your name and email, and you'll get a confirmation email and have to activate your registration. So I encourage all of you to apply for the Social Innovation Challenge, and we actually have an opportunity for you all to win something if you register your project by the end of today. So hold on one second. So register your projects at sandiego.dellchallenge.org by the end of today for the chance to win a $100 yoga gift certificate or one of 2 $25 Chipotle gift cards. So when I say register your project, that does not mean that you have to have everything figured out. It means you have an idea, and you might not be able to answer your 5 questions yet, but you at least put the name of the project up on our platform, and you commit to doing a project. And you have till March 3rd to fill in all the details, to answer your questions, and to get it ready to be judged in round 1 of the Social Innovation Challenge. So those 5 questions are: what is your innovation? Who gains the most from it? Who pays for it? What is success? And how will you do it? So these are 5 questions, and we ask you to answer them in 250 words or less for round 1. So it's really a simple process, and then if you pass on to the next round of judging, that's when you actually create a plan and a short video. And then in round 3, if you're a finalist, you give a live pitch before an audience, a panel of judges. And we have really top-notch judges who will be great people to not only present your ideas to, but also network with. And then we have the announcement of our winners at our awards ceremony on May 2nd. So I encourage you all to get your projects up on the platform. I saw a bunch of hands up here that you're planning to register. That means you have an idea. That means every single one of those hands raised could easily put something up on the platform today. And then we're gonna have a free and fair raffle drawing in our office tomorrow, and I will email the winners with information about how to pick up their prizes. So I encourage you all to apply. And also today, if you're a tweeter, tweet along with hashtag SIC2014. We welcome tweets in this room. And I'm gonna bring Steve back up here to tell you a little bit about our speakers who are with us today, one of whom is still on her way.
Right, so thank you, Grace, by the way. And again, I just want to emphasize one thing. I think students are often nervous about putting a project up on the platform because they feel like, well, once it's up, that's it. But that's only the first step. You can keep adjusting it and editing it, right? So think about this process of putting it up and then editing it over time as you think about it some more, kind of massaging it. And then on March 3rd, we'll actually, wherever it is at that stage, we'll judge it. And the round 1 judging is really about clarity. It's not even so much thumbs up or thumbs down on the idea. It's just, has this person articulated their answers to these 5 questions effectively? Because we feel like if you can't answer those 5 questions clearly, then no matter how great the idea, it's just not worth continuing, right? So the first thing is about clarity. Rounds 2 and 3 are more about the quality of the project. Is this a really good idea? Is this a good, viable project? And again, we're encouraging social innovation, but it doesn't have to be the next, greatest invention ever. There are only very few very innovative things out there. So you may think about innovating, kind of riffing on something else that's already out there. So I just want to encourage you to do that. Today's Idea Lab, we have 2 presenters, Donna Morton and Rob Hanna. I'll introduce Donna Morton now, even though she's not here. I'll just give you the background, and then when she's here, I'll just say, okay, and there's Donna. And so she's an Ashoka Fellow and an Unreasonable Fellow. I've met many Unreasonable Fellows and women as well. But anyway, yeah, I know, that was not very good. Unreasonable, it comes from the Unreasonable Institute, which is actually a pretty cool organization. Google it and find out more about the Unreasonable Institute. So she's an Unreasonable Fellow and an Agant Fellow based in Boulder, Colorado, and Vancouver, British Columbia. Also the co-founded First Power, a B Corp with a mission to put clean energy, jobs, and equity in the hands of First Nations and other communities. Donna's been a change maker, a serial social entrepreneur for decades, focused on the fields and intersections of economics, finance, and entrepreneurship. Yes. That ends extreme poverty and climate change. She has particular skills in storytelling, social media, and sustainability. She's worked in NGOs. She's extensive public speaking experience, including 5 TEDx talks. Yes, we bring you quality presenters here. Over the past 2 years, her work has been seen in Fast Company, The Guardian, and Act for the Planet TV series, which aired around the world. That's Donna, and she will be coming here shortly. Her plane arrived about 20 minutes ago. Rob Hanna who's in the back of the room, with many of you have already had your picture taken with him, is a regular guest, a frequent guest to USD, and has been very instrumental in helping us get our Social Innovation Challenge up to where it is, to where we're the leader in San Diego, and hopefully beyond. And Rob's been very instrumental in that. He started out with Dell Social Innovation Challenge in this space, but long before that, he's got a world of experience from Wall Street and other places. An international speaker on social impacts, impact investing, innovation, and community entrepreneurship. Core expertise derives from 20 years of work leading governments, philanthropies, corporations, nonprofits, and communities to net positive gains in many domains. He currently serves as the founding partner and product architect of Social Wealth Partners, a social impact consultancy. As director of Impacts for Hope campaign, a global charitable events and production organization, and is managing director of Social Wealth Investment Management, Inc. It's a private impact investing venture fund. So clearly, impact investing funds are going to want to know about social impact. And again, hence his credentials to talk about the topic today. Chief architect of the Dell Social Innovation Challenge, which I mentioned a minute ago. Rob, are they giving around about $300K now?
Yeah.
Dell SIC, yeah, around $300,000. And so we have a connection with them. Our platform comes from them. Anyway, passion is guiding individuals to make the best financial, in-kind, and human use of available resources focused on improving the world. His insights and trainings accelerate social innovation and entrepreneurship for public good in every engagement, as he believes everyone has latent abilities to create wealth for society. All can share social wealth. So let's bring up Rob Hanna. Thank you. Embrace. Oh, I'm supposed to bring up the slides.
Hey,
He was actually supposed to bring me back up. So.
Oh, yeah,
well,
sorry.
Brace, I'm going to speak from the back when I do come up, just to annoy the people.
Okay, perfect. Well, not just because I want to kill time, because I want to have fun, we're going to have one more little activity before we bring up our speakers. So I know that everybody here is here because they're interested in, well, maybe they're interested in a free lunch, but hopefully they're also interested in making a positive impact in the world. And I want to get us to start thinking and start getting those creative juices flowing about what kind of impacts we want to make. And let's just be a little bit practical and concrete in our own lives this semester. What is an impact, a positive impact that you want to make somehow in your life this semester? It could be personally, it could be in school, it could be in your workplace. So I invite you to think about that and share with the person sitting next to you what is an impact that you want to make in the next few months.
Okay, so you all heard Steve introduce Donna briefly. And Donna is currently working as the relationship coordinator, is that correct?
More business development.
The business development person at Principium, which is an impact investing firm. So everybody in this room is interested in creating some kind of social change. That's why they're here.
Okay.
And I understand that you approach social change work from the perspective of finance and looking at the economy. And I'm wondering, we're going to kind of start big and broad. And can you share with us how you see the role of finance in the economy in shaping the global challenges that we're facing today?
Well, thanks for inviting me. Can you hear me okay? Is the sound working? Yeah, I don't feel like I'm mic'd.
No, you're not.
Okay, so I'll just be loud then. I'll just be really loud. So, you know, I spent a lot of time in the environmental movement, in the sustainability movement. I worked for a decade on carbon taxes in Canada. And I got to the place where I felt like everything everyone was doing randomly in the environmental movement, in the social justice movement, that we were missing that actually all of the big changes in the economy are cued by finance. That the finance sector actually is the most powerful sector, the most dynamic, the fastest moving body on the planet. There's no government, there's no agency that moves as swiftly, as powerfully, or as effectively as finance. And so I got really interested in finance and have sort of we built a fairly unusual finance company with people from the conventional kind of banking finance world, people from sustainability, people from economic development, majority women, half people of color. So we're an unusual finance company with unusual agendas.
And your company is called Principium?
Yes.
Yes, okay. And we're going to hear a little bit more specifically about what they're doing in a minute. Donna, I've heard you use the term regenerative economy, as I've heard you talk about the kind of economy that you want to create. So can you tell us what that means? What is that vision for a regenerative economy?
So we borrow regenerative economy from permaculture. Who knows about permaculture in the room? So basically, it's a very intensive land based kind of agriculture and living system that really pays very close attention to how natural systems, how ecosystems thrive, and actually looks for opportunities for humans to be net positive in the way they interact with living systems. So people like Hunter Levins and John Fullerton from the Capital Institute, do you know about the Capital Institute? Check it out. It's one of the more interesting nonprofits out there, started by ex-Wall Street people who are, in essence, trying to point the whole finance sector at this kind of regenerative space. And so the idea is, let's look at, my friend Hunter uses the metaphor of a ladder. So imagine a ladder that the base of the ladder is in a mess like the tar sands in Canada. And so that's the bottom. Activist organizations are a rung or two up. Sustainability organizations, a couple of rungs up. And sometimes our society looks up towards sustainability, but for many of us, sustainability isn't enough to get really catalyzed. That lots of us believe that sustaining poverty the way it is in the world, sustaining ecosystems that have been trashed is actually kind of absurd, that the time to be sustainable has come and passed. And so we actually have to build a story that goes way beyond sustaining things that are broken. We have to look at regenerating earth systems, cultural systems, communities, and even our families and the whole of our lives. And so this concept of regeneration or regenerative design becomes a blueprint for finance. And so we're, in essence, trying to build a finance company that creates powerful stepping stones towards a regenerative economy. And we think finance is an instrumental way to move us towards a regenerative economy.
Very interesting. And when I think about finance and I think about the economy, I think about people who have studied economics, and I feel like, oh, I'm a little lost in that space. I didn't do very well in my econ class when I was in college.
Me neither.
So I'm curious, how did you end up in this space? If you could tell us a little bit about your journey. For anyone here who is on the path toward becoming a social entrepreneur, it's always good to hear how others have gone and what their journeys have been like.
So there's absolutely no logic to the course of my career or my life. I actually started as a film major, studying comparative literature and sculpture. And so I actually have carried that artist sensibility into just about everything I've ever done. So when I worked on economics, I was an artist doing economics. I ran an energy company for 5 years, but I integrated art and energy into my projects. And now I actually feel like I'm bringing that sense of aesthetic that I gained from the liberal arts and fine arts into finance. That I think we have to make finance, we have to make it higher, like poets make the human condition higher, like ballerinas show us what the human body is capable of. I think it's time that we actually stretch and pull and coerce finance towards things that we love, things that we treasure, and things that matter. And the idea that finance is liquidating the survival systems of the planet is ridiculous. And so it's time to retrain finance to build the world we want. And I think finance is actually the most powerful sector to do that. And I know enough about what I don't know, so I would never have started a finance company alone. Our portfolio manager has a 25-year track record running money very successfully. We have an ex-Wall Street guy who runs our public equity and private equity side. We have a woman from the UK who's one of the world's best fund managers who is building our fund to fund. Our team is very complex. And I'm more of the storyteller and the person that sits down with people and says, what do you love? What makes you crazy? Now let's design your portfolio so that it plays to what you love, and we move money into things that are healing for the world, and we move money out of stuff that's trashing the world. And so I love what I do. I love it.
Well, a lot, and I know that some students in here have probably not heard before of the term impact investing. And so I'm wondering if you can kind of outline for them some of the goals of your company.
Yeah.
What is Principium doing? What does that look like? And how does it relate maybe, because these students, maybe some of them do want to become impact investors, but I think most of them are interested in creating their own projects that might receive some kind of funding from an impact investor. Can you kind of talk to what Principium does and how that connects to the work on the ground?
So first, I'll map a little bit. So have you heard of SRI, social return on investment? Is that a concept that you've heard of? The origin of impact investing actually started, I would say, with the move to abolish slavery, got steepened with the anti-apartheid movement, which is actually where my politics got formed in the 80s. So screens, the idea of having negative screens, sin screens, the churches built a lot of efforts to take liquor and firearms out of their portfolios in the early days. That's kind of where the whole thing started. So this idea that we're not going to invest in things that we absolutely loathe. So for people, it started out as tobacco, guns, firearms, and then it moved into something called ESG, or environmental and social governance, which was the next iteration, which tried to bring together a more systematic approach to both divesting from bad things and investing in positive things. But still, I would say there's a lightness to ESG. Some people would disagree with me, but impact investing, I think, is really trying to go deeper, because the first two mechanisms, the SRI and the ESG, it really was only looking at publicly traded entities. So mutual funds primarily. How do you clean mutual funds so that they're as good as possible for people's personal retirement money and for pension funds? And what we're trying to do is actually not treat impact investing as a single asset class within finance. We actually see impact investing moving across all asset classes and being both on the public and the private side. And we have a foundation, so we're also going to use our sort of philanthropic capabilities to do investing more the way a philanthropic organization would. So we actually, we're by intention trying to move people's money, institutional capital, retirement savings, endowments of universities, the whole enchilada. And we're really looking to target moving billions of dollars. We're not trying to build a little tiny shop that plays in the margins. We're actually really trying to move significant capital out of harmful things into things that are good for the world, which is really what I think is exciting about impact investing. And then, the really super cool part is if you get good enough at it, you actually can start to invest in, really small-scale entrepreneurs. And the thing that pulled me into this space was, in 2011, I was an Unreasonable Fellow. Have you ever heard of the Unreasonable Institute? Okay, that's another thing. Check it out. It's really, really awesome. They take radical businesses from all over the world that want to change the world, and they put them in a frat house in Boulder, Colorado for 6 weeks, which is weird, but awesome. So I was there with people from 26 different entrepreneurs from 17 countries. And we were exposed to mentors, capital partners, people that had built amazing multi-billion-dollar companies, and really got sort of a serious boot camp introduction to the world of both how do you finance a small-scale enterprise and how does institutional capital work. But for me, it's that the majority of the money does not go to women, people of color, or people in so-called emerging markets or the poorest nations on the planet. That's the thing that really pulled me hard and fast into this space, is I basically thought, that's wrong. Some of the most innovative, disruptive innovators I know globally are women, indigenous, and people of color. And so part of our agenda as a company is that we're going to use the majority of our profits, not our clients' money, our money that we earn by impact investing and by asset management. And we're going to do direct investments to take the first loss position, to really step up and be that first investor that de-risks women, Indigenous, and people of color. That's the part that's really, really fun. And that's the part that we're really building this for.
So you're giving opportunities to people who are emerging entrepreneurs who wouldn't traditionally have that opportunity in our market.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any slides you want to.
Oh, yeah.
Just that arrow. So.
Slides. I'm going to let you come back to this one later. Some of these are more kind of educational about the organization. This one is really important. So the driver, besides de-risking disruptive entrepreneurs for us as a company, is how do we move money so that we abate climate change and stop extreme poverty, right? So the specific goals or the specific high-level metrics for our company is what do we do to stop climate change and how do we measure that, and what do we do to stop the extremity and the gap between rich and poor. And so those are the big things that we're sort of tackling as a company, which is also unusual for a finance company to position itself to tackle big issues. Most finance companies feel like they're totally neutral to what's going on in the world, and we're anything but neutral. And then this is just a quick illustration of elements that I think are part of a regenerative economy, where we're really looking at overhauling the transportation system, the energy system, the food system. But one of the things I did in a previous life, as I said, was run an energy company that we did clean energy projects for Indigenous communities in Canada. And we did some amazing projects where we integrated art with energy, and it changed the caliber of the project. Like when communities feel like their culture and their values are brought into a project, it's transformative. And I'm going to show you a case study or two. I'm going to save this one too for later. This is just a quick glimpse of our team, and that we've worked in 34 countries, and that we're very varied in terms of where we come from and what our skill set includes. This is a company I wanted to tell you about. Have any of you heard of Popinjay? It used to be called Bliss. It's a handbag company out of Pakistan, started by Saba Gul, the woman at the center top of the screen. And she basically earned 2 degrees from MIT, one in mathematics and one in business management, got a job at a Fortune 500 company, and then had this huge kind of personal crash where she realized that the majority of women in her country would never have the kinds of opportunities that she had to get a basic education, let alone a really fantastic global education. So she went back to Pakistan to figure out what could she do particularly to educate girls and to build entrepreneurship skills within women in Pakistan. And she built this company that makes these handbags that have just built a deal with Anthropology, so they're about to get some really serious traction. One of the handbags was taken to the Emmys this year by a Pakistani actor. There's a couple of bags being carried by famous women and dignitaries, so they're starting to really get traction. But what's amazing is they take women that were either extremely marginally part of the economy, really struggling, or girls that are, in essence, enslaved on the looms in Pakistan. They help them get an education. They teach them this really high-end embroidery. They turn the embroidery into bags, and they pay for the whole system. There's no government money. There's no philanthropy. There is nothing but a business model that is the transformative agent in this company, which I think is really interesting. And they're building a business that, again, is weaving the threads of culture. So, some of the patterns on these bags are 3,000 and 4,000 years old, from, tapestries and from tiles. So there's something deeper than just education, deeper than just teaching women about business. There's something that is healing the relationship between the culture and women and the economy that's built into their business model that I think is really important to think about. And then this is Anne Shongwei on the far left from South Africa. And she's built one of the coolest tech companies coming out of South Africa called Afro's Transformational Games. They basically use mobile apps on phones to teach kids about dignity, about safety. They're transforming violence issues, sexual aggression against girls. They're taking on a whole bunch of issues through games that cost 10 cents a unit on mobile phones. So again, they're weaving culture, they're doing a bunch of really interesting things, but it's also primarily a women-run social entrepreneur tech company, which is, I think, really, really interesting. We can hold on this one.
Yeah, so thank you so much for giving us those examples, those case studies of really amazing examples of social innovations. And I think the first one, Popinjay, resonated particularly with me because I'm trying to do a weaving project with refugees from Burma here in San Diego.
Cool.
So Principium wants to invest in these kinds of companies that are doing these kinds of impactful work. And I know that at Principium, you're involved in a process of designing the specific metrics for how you're going to gauge where you invest your money. And I'm curious if you can tell us how you're doing this and what are the metrics that you've been developing.
So the larger story is that 2 or 3 of us in the company, having sort of sustainability track records, we have our own degree of cynicism about the world of impact investing. So when we decided to build an impact investing company, we didn't actually want to be soft and squishy about what we mean by impact. And I frequently at conferences in this space get frustrated by the huge differentiations between some company claiming to have impact and another company. I mean, everyone has impact, positive or negative or neutral, right? Impact is everywhere all the time. We all have impact in our daily lives and with our bank accounts and our credit cards. But if we're going to be meaningful when we use the word impact in this particular context, we want it to be very clear and we wanted to be as precise as possible. So we actually wanted to build a set of metrics. And so we started scanning. There's a massive body that will flood you if you start looking at the documents that describe various organizations and their approach to meaningful metrics. So we started with IRIS and GEARS, and they're very weighty documents. There's hundreds and hundreds of ways that they point to measuring impact. And so that wasn't the approach we wanted. We didn't want 200 things that didn't sort of stand together as a whole system. We wanted to measure a limited number of things that really taken together mean something in pointing us towards a regenerative economy. And we wanted the metrics to be intuitive, not onerous, because we're going to be asking companies to measure these things, but we also want them to have emotional resonance. We want them to actually ring inside people's chest cavities, right? That it should inspire you to want to measure these things, not feel like some heavy thing that's laid on top of you. So that was sort of our approach, that it would tell this coherent story at the end of the day. And my fantasy is that when we're finished our metrics program, we're going to have a little dashboard at the bottom of our website so that anytime you want to know what we're doing in the world, you click on this dashboard and it says, we have done these concrete things. And then there's little video links and a story emerges that helps you kind of go deeper. Because, in an approach to metrics, I think we can measure things that are meaningful, but not everything meaningful can be measured. So we're really trying to live between, yes, a reductionist world that limits the variables down to 10 things that are meaningful, but we want to tell larger stories beyond just the numbers, right? So that's our approach. We started gathering other people's research first. Then we brought in something called the HIP process, HIP investor. Anyone heard of HIP, H-I-P? So I've known the founder of this program for, 10 years, a guy named Paul Herman. He comes out of McKinsey, Ashoka. He worked for the Omidyar network. He's got some serious chops when it comes to analytics. But he's built this, really interesting way of measuring not only the numerical performance of a company, but they've built a system where they can analyze the future risk of a company. So most of the times in finance, when they examine risk, when they profile risk for a company, the risk profile is based on looking backwards 10 or 20 years at the track record of a company, which is all well and good unless there's a sea change, right? And right now, I would argue because of issues like human rights, climate change, there is a sea change. So I would argue that it's a meaningless system to analyze the performance of Dow Chemical, Monsanto, and Exxon based on their past performance. If you're not looking at their future liabilities, if you're not looking at the massive change that's happening in society, sometimes with regulators, but definitely amongst people and the power of social media, if you're not looking at those factors when you examine the risk profile of a company, you're missing really critical information. So we brought in Paul's metrics to help us kind of go deeper on that front. We borrowed a little bit from some of the ESG metrics, but then we decided that ultimately we care about the health of Earth's systems, first of all. So there's a really brilliant academic out of Sweden called Johan Rockström who built a system to analyze the Earth's planetary boundaries. It's called the 9 planetary boundaries theory. It's also interesting if you're a nerd, but I really like it. And so, Rockström basically has done this analysis and says, listen, there's these 9 life support systems on Earth. We are out of whack on 3 of them. So the carbon cycle, the nitrogen cycle, and biodiversity are in a total mess. And so we decided, okay, we're going to borrow from Rockström for our first 3 metrics. So we want to know that the companies we're investing in are taking the Earth and its survival systems back on track. So the first 3 things we measure are carbon, nitrogen, and biodiversity. And then we wanted to know about what's the impact on individuals. So how are the things we're investing in improving the condition of girls and women, which is the next one. How are our investments closing the gap between rich and poor globally? How are our investments building meaningful work? Because it's not just about jobs. It's about jobs that make people feel like their lives matter. It's work that is restoring people's confidence in the world, restoring people's commitment to place. So meaningful work is one of the things that we measure. We want the companies we invest in to create work that makes you want to get up in the morning and makes you proud to tell your children about at night. And then we wanted to look at metrics that were really fundamentally on this regenerative path. So we wanted to measure things like resiliency, which is complex to measure, and Rob's going to, I think, join me in this conversation very soon about how do we measure some very complex things. How do we measure the resiliency of a community and whether a company is contributing or harming a community's ability to be resilient? Because in this next 20 or 30 years, resiliency is going to be a fundamental differentiator between places that fall apart and places that start to regenerate and thrive. And then we wanted to measure the idea of, and I think this is a very complicated one, the idea of a business that in some way is an expression of the sacred or an expression of the highest aspirations of humans. So back to my poetry reference, we want to invest in companies that make people excited and confirmed as human beings, the way Nelson Mandela did through his example, the way the poetry of Mary Oliver makes people feel like humans can be more than we are. So we actually want that in businesses. We want to invest in businesses that set their sights beyond making stuff and serving people and making money to the point where there's actually something spiritual. And I'm using that term very softly, loosely, and we can talk about that some more. But it's this idea that business can be service. Business can be a calling. Business can be a way of working for humanity. And we really want to help move people's money into those kinds of businesses. So that's sort of the terrain. The various metrics we're examining move from Earth systems to impacts on individuals to kind of defining healthy communities to then these kind of higher aspirational goals. And that's really what we want to invest in.
So thank you for painting that picture. It's really helpful, and it's inspiring to hear about, for me, especially these higher aspirational goals. But I heard you say at one point, not everything meaningful can be measured. But I've heard Hanna say that anything meaningful can be measured. And so I want to invite Rob up to take my place up here and bring this conversation, some of your practical impact measurement skills to it, and invite our students to join in that conversation.
All right. Does anybody know what Google's Ngram viewer is? Anybody know what Google is? Awesome. Well, in Google's do no harm, do no evil? Is that Google? Okay. In their insidious way of getting into all aspects of our lives, Google has a project where they're actually trying to make every book on record electronic and scannable. And the Ngram viewer allows you, any of us, to go online right now, put in a word, and it will search for the incidence of that word throughout all published books, from the 1800s forward to, I think the most recent now is 2008. So I picked up some words that in this space of impact investing and social entrepreneurship and innovation seems to be having a lot of currency. And the first one is success. And you can see that from the 1800s forward, success, if it was a stock, you haven't lost a lot, but if you factor in inflation, maybe you have, I don't know. But it really isn't been on an upward tilt. So what do you think can top success? Well, purpose. Look at purpose. Now, purpose also has seen a little bit of discounting over the centuries, interesting enough, but still comes in solidly above success. And then we also hear, in many places now, being talked about meaning. Meaning above purpose and above success. They come along for the ride. And since I did a lot of consulting with groups that are out in the field, I found that activities has seen a lot of recent currency, largely since the end of World War II. So we're much more commonly seeing in print the notion of having activities to get something done. But do we stop at activities? No. I think we find that even more common assessment and currency is around results. And look at the growth line of results. Isn't that interesting? Results seems to have kept its value, if not appreciated, especially comparative to these other asset words of activities, meaning, purpose, and success. And then comes to my favorite word of all, value. Value brings it all along for the ride. Success, purpose, meaning, activities, results. Value. Value for who? For the people you're trying to help, for you, for society as a whole, right? We tend to prefer and want things of greater value than less, yes? The other interesting thing about value compared to meaning, and I did say that everything is meaningful, but it's fairly subjective. The meaning of this day to me is going to be different than the meaning for all of you, and independently so. However, value is something that is a social construct because it's sort of intrinsically linked with price, with negotiation, with barter. If we both value that projector, chances are we're going to come to some sort of agreement on what that value is if we're willing to transact in it. And since social enterprise and innovation is ultimately a social transactional basis of commerce, value is in there. It's embedded in everything we do. Impacts are embedded in everything we do. The question is, are we paying attention and are we intending them? And do we have some formal way, objectively, of all of us agreeing on their net value? Positive, negative, neutral. So my background from Wall Street and then 13 years at a think tank in upstate New York called the Rensselaer Institute has really ingrained in me the notion of value, not only in a financial conceit, but in a human in-kind way, in tangible assets, in ideas, and also pushing that from at rest, from just a concept, moving beyond activities to results or outcomes. And not outcomes just for me or my team or the people, my strategic partners who might be helping me with my product, but outcomes essentially for the beneficiaries and end users or customers if they're paying for it. for every social innovation and entrepreneurship. So that's just the context that I bring to this conversation. Just want to give you a little bit of that background, so now we can go ahead and move forward to value.
That's fun.
Grace, were you going to?
You have the floor.
Okay.
Opportunity now for
Okay, well, we chatted on the phone. I was in Sedona with my wife. She was presenting at the yoga festival, and so I said, Grace, I think we should get Donna on the phone. We should talk. And so we had a nice conversation, and I was delighted. I had not met Donna before, but I was delighted to hear of what she was doing at Principium, and also, as she's mentioned, some of her viewpoints on the industry of impact investing. And I'm probably a socially responsible investor before an impact investor, now that that's the label. But the behaviors underneath the labels are still the same for about 20 years. And I absolutely agree with her assessment. I think the term impact investing, I mean, whenever you sort of add an adjective or an adverb to a word, you kind of ask or beg for more rigor. It's been all over the place. And so I have both a healthy dose of cynicism and optimism for this emerging area of human activity and endeavor that typically is associated with putting good dollars to work at driving good results. I'm very passionate about it. And I do think that there's a tremendous amount of opportunity, and I'm very grateful and thankful that there are firms like Principium and Donna out there carving out and creating a space for much more. I take issue with your point of saying you don't have a logical career path. You do have a logical one, but it's kind of heart-centered logic. It's not sort of linear thinking.
That's true.
But creating that path for more heart-centered logical impacts to arise, and in a way. And also, I think, creating sort of places for you guys to land with your ideas. Stephen introduced the challenge, and I was commenting to one of the faculty in the back about the choice of word of application. And in academic settings, applications are the coin of the realm. It's the common sense. Yet the challenge is not meant as an act of compliance. You're not here to comply with the demands of the challenge. You're here to be challenged so that whenever you touch the challenge, just by answering the 5 questions, you're somehow better off than you were prior to doing that. Value to you. You don't have to look at this as a challenge to be comparatively better or worse than the person sitting next to you. It's a challenge for you to get somewhere more progressively down a continuum that you're already envisioning yourself. Okay, so clarity comes first, and then improving the probabilities. And I would like to have the same thing for impact investors, where we're challenged to go from perhaps the broad idea of being activity-based. What do? I invest. Cool. How much have you invested? Oh, wow. The more you invest, the better the impact investor you are. Really? Maybe not. Investors are obsessed by return on investment, not just kicking money out the door. And so if we bring in this sort of adjective of impact or adverb of impact to investing, we have to have some way of making sure there's evidence for that happening. And I would say that all evidence shouldn't just be a meaningful metric to me. It should be one we can all share and agree on. And in fact, I push a lot of organizations, both the entrepreneurs and those who would fund them, to clarity on saying, if we had a Greek chorus in here, let's make it a yes or no statement. I don't want to do an evaluation. I just want to know yes or no. Is the kid reading on grade? Simple. And you can, and this is where my statement comes from, you could take any broad domain, portfolio, investment, asset class, and drive it down all the way to the level of an individual person who has these ABCs, who has achieved some recognizable gain of awareness. You guys are getting US degrees, is that what you call it? The USDs? Greater awareness, maybe these are thinking models, maybe it could be anything. Better behaviors or better conditions. And those are the only 3. It's kind of like water. It could be vapor, liquid, or solid ice. So ABCs, I don't get stuck up on it because, what's math's foundational undefinable terms, point, line, plane. Who knows what they mean? They all define each other. I mean, it's crazy stuff. So don't get too obsessed on trying to categorize what's awareness, what's behavior, what's conditions. Keep it really at a level of just observational clarity. We don't have to get down into scientific causality and differentiation. So I guess from this point, what I saw up on the chart was a very good and clear articulation of sort of portfolio domains. And I think you mentioned that in terms of getting more active support for women and minorities in this domain, driving more funding to them and having some way of sort of accounting for that. Do you guys, and it's interesting because one of the problems is there's no S&P 500 for social impacts. There's no real way of sort of looking already at existing and established benchmarks. So in many ways, we have to almost create our own. And do you guys actually have some sort of external benchmarks that you're looking at moving one way or another in these domains?
So there's a bunch of things, and actually there's a new social entrepreneurship program that's actually called the Game Changers 500. That's actually trying to be the alternative to the S&P 500, and we actually just did their quiz and did quite well. So we're on the verge of being listed. So there are increasingly external agencies, and there's gears and B corporations. Have you heard of B corporations? So, you know, I think that's a really important third-party external kind of validation piece where, you know, you're actually having companies certified as being values-driven, and it's quite rigorous. I did it with the energy company that I had, and it's a lot of work. It was like 40 hours plus 2 interns times 3 spreadsheets in order to demonstrate that we could be a B corporation. But it's more than just saying, for me, it's well beyond corporate social responsibility. I think I'm particularly cynical about CSR and the idea that you bolt on values to a core of operation that is unethical.
Right.
Whereas B corporations are trying to have the ethics and the values baked into the model, that actually the change, the impact is happening through the absolute fundamental core of operations. And I think that's really important.
Do you have any, I'd be interested, a couple of companies come to mind as good sort of examples of that, like Patagonia, who does all the way up supply chain down to product reclamation and reuse. But you talked about regenerative, and I know in the Netherlands there's this whole thing about the circular economy coming out right now, sort of cradle to cradle, which is, interestingly enough, there's almost like a kairetsu, which in Japan was like a collaborative of industry giants agreeing to conduct business a certain way, and this is much more higher refinement and purification of materials so that they can have less cost of reusing them, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's very interesting that a lot of these principles are happening already in certain places. And I guess for these guys, when money becomes a large part of the question, you know, whether it's just you're past your own pocketbook and friends and family, and you're looking for that next leg up, whether it's a super angel or angel or some sort of giving club, how much do you now see the emphasis being upon valuing the social impact side and potential of any given enterprise or a product that the enterprise is working on in your decision making, or it's perhaps in other peers that are making decisions about allocating money in the very early stage?
I think that's a really critical question, and one of the things that was sort of the mantra at the Unreasonable Institute was this idea of, are you a business, first of all? Do you actually have a way of being sustainable? Do you actually have a handle on the business functionality of what you're doing? Does your model actually work in a way that is sustainable? And then secondarily, what is your impact, and how do you create as much impact as possible tied back into that model? How do they work together? Because I've known spectacularly beautiful companies that couldn't get off the ground because the model was so flawed. And I've also known, you know, I would say very light on the impact companies that could go like gangbusters. So I think we're at this new moment in time where maybe for the first time in a very long time, and Patagonia is a classical example of a highly successful, I would argue, highly positive, impactful company. And they were one of the first listed, actually, in this Game Changers 500. One of the first companies that went through their model was Patagonia. So I believe, and there's stacks and stacks of evidence that today you can both build a beautiful business that can make money, that is investable, though it is harder if the principals in your company are women and highly pigmented. The evidence is still that it's, you know, the smarty pants white guys in Silicon Valley that are getting the majority of the deals. And there's people like me that are trying to shift that and flow more capital. And there's a whole bunch of ways we're doing that. There's a project called Village Capital, which has probably the best track record on the planet at flowing capital to startup women. They have about 40% of all their deals go to women, and that is
Do you know about this
huge.
model? Village Capital is very interesting. They bring together, they bring together a group of entrepreneurs, and the entrepreneurs themselves literally decide who's going to get the pitch. So it's almost like, what is this, you know, like what's that, those islands where you kill off, Survivor. It's almost like Survivor, but it's the exact opposite. Instead of being cutthroat, they actually band together and collaborate, and they say, you know what, you've got the best chance of making it a success. You go ahead and get the funding.
So I'm interested in what you're saying in terms of making any kind of, you know, you're speaking from the perspective of the assumption of business. And for our Social Innovation Challenge, we also invite students to enter nonprofit models into the mix. So I'm wondering if you two can help guide our students a little in how to think about articulating their impacts, whether or not it is a business or a nonprofit model.
Well, I think there's two things. The clarity piece is an operational challenge for you. If you don't know what you're after, you don't know how to then assemble and align resources to get it. That's an operational challenge, no matter if you're for-profit or charitable, right off the bat. How you communicate what you're after to an audience of potential funders is going to vary. You may not even mention impacts, except in passing, to get funding. Absolutely. And then get the funding and go out and get the impacts. That's perfectly fine. We're not suggesting that a social enterprise or social impact organization has to fly the banner of social for the whole world to see. What we are suggesting is that until you get down to a level of clarity that the whole world can understand the impact that you're after, it's going to be hard for you to build an operating going concern that's going to thrive, scale, and kick butt, right? One of the things that we could focus on team and assemble a business model around us because we've got interesting skills. What do you want to do? Oh, I don't know. Let's just do something together. That's one way of doing it, and that's fine. You could focus along product, and a lot of the hoopla nowadays is about product, right? Tech products and apps. That's what all the charrettes are about. Let's do apps. Yay, okay, great. That's fine, wonderful. The kind of app you are building is going to determine the type of people you hire, right? Okay, the same thing is true about outcomes and impacts. Once you decide what impact you're after, that's going to change everything. It's also going to open up tremendous opportunity along the way to not just sit here at the starting line and wait for angel funding and grants and everything else to show up, but now you're going to have clarity of a whole horizon of strategics who both through in-kind and contributions can buy down your costs of operations and scale and rapidly accelerate your ability to operate and achieve impacts with that clarity. Because now you're no longer dictating to everybody else, I'm product-centric, or I'm team-centric, or I'm business model-centric. Now you're impact-centric. And then you pull back from that, and then you do everything else that everybody else has wholesomely told us to do, that we should do, the traditional business and the traditional nonprofit things. But you've got this under the hood. And this, once you have this under the hood in your operations, you're unstoppable. You can innovate every step of the way because you have a target. That's hard, it's evidentiary, it's measurable. So most of the conversations that you're going to hear out there are going to be up at the level of broad domains of outcomes and impacts, environment, right? Justice, social justice, equality. You've got to drive them all the way down to the individual. And then you can come back up and play in the game once you're clear on that. Does that make sense?
Can I add another little piece?
Please.
So back to the sort of nonprofit, for-profit model thing, one of the things that was really interesting at the Unreasonable Institute also, and has certainly been true for me, so I've now built 5 different entities over my 30-year career, and the first 3 were NGOs, and it's only the last 2 that have actually been in the for-profit space. And so one of the things we talked a lot about at the Unreasonable Institute, and a lot of the companies that came in left as nonprofits, and a lot of the nonprofits left as companies. And so one of the gurus in our space who runs something called Structure Lab is a woman named Joy Anderson at the Criterion Institute. And if you're structure confused, you really want to check out their materials, because what they basically say is you need to start with your impacts. You need to start with what it is you want to achieve. You need to then wrap your model around that, but don't get attached to being a not-for-profit or a
Exactly.
for-profit or a
Exactly.
co-op. Because in actuality now, Principium is all three. We are primarily structuring as a co-op, tier 1. The co-op has oversight over 3 other entities. One is a private equity business, one is a public equity business, and the third is a foundation. So we're actually a hybrid of every structure out there in order to do everything we want to do and play across the entire impact continuum, which is our objective. How do we, move massive amounts of money in lots of different innovative ways? We actually needed lots of flexibility across structures. So I think there's a lot of tendencies for people to say, oh, I'm a nonprofit person or I'm a for-profit person. Actually, you don't know. and stay soft and open, because you might find that the needs of your mission and your impact pull you in a different direction. The other entity to look at out there in this space is the Malago Foundation. There's a guy named Kevin Starr. You want to look at any talk he's ever done on YouTube, because he is a metrics guru, right? And he's very, very disciplined. He mostly funds not-for-profits, but they do it through program-related investments. So they're doing philanthropy and investing in some really, really innovative ways. So those are 2 really good resources.
Raise your hand if you're going to or already have a project in the SIC. No, raise it up high. Come on, guys. Seriously. Okay? Put your hands on. Now raise your hand if you'd like to, but don't yet. Awesome.
Cool.
Great. And now raise your hand if you all feel that you have a clear definition or an understanding of what your innovation is. Great. Let's hear some. What's your innovation?
I build solar-powered, modern, sustainable studio dwellings for right now.
Awesome.
10 by 12, and I want to get involved with charity groups that work with either children or homeless people or needy people.
Cool. Let's quickly go around the room. How about you?
It's a way for nonprofits to accept donations via Twitter and for potential donors to send those donations simply by retweeting.
Cool.
Awesome.
Next. Crowdfunding for scholarships. Awesome.
Job creation and finding the gaps in how to stimulate the generations to creating work.
Excellent. Over here.
I have a combat service member create a nonprofit that helps victims of war and transitioning service members to readjust to coming back from the ending of the war.
Great.
Really cool.
Very simple. I mean, you guys are, if you haven't already filled out that question, you're already there. So, and I also want to just illustrate to the rest of you guys, it's as simple as that. We're not asking you to have success. We're just asking you to have what's your innovation and idea at this point. Can you be clear about it? Okay. The other thing is, Grace?
Who gains the most?
Thank you. This is where it gets interesting. So I like to say that I gain the most in everything I do. Isn't that nice? But who else would care? So I have to go a little bit farther than that. Sometimes I try to make the people around me happy, but is that enough? No. So eventually we have to get all the way down that continuum of gain. And thinking about that is no easy task. It's simple, but it's not easy because there's a lot of potential there. Paying customers, non-paying beneficiaries. Oh, and by the way, just a quick trace back. A sustainable or a going concern company makes sense for a certain type of social impact, right? Where you're making more good things for the world. You want to essentially become a utility company, which is a monopoly serving the highest quality at the less cost to the most people possible. You want to stay in business. However, if I'm in the business of eliminating cancer, I want to go out of business as quickly as possible and get the job done, right? So certain different impacts lend to the value of having a going concern. And unfortunately, a lot of the problems that we currently have with a lot of intermediate organizations is they have a going concern mentality and try to sustain themselves in a market or an area where they should be going out of business as quickly as possible. So we'll talk a little bit about that more, but just in terms of who gains the most, how you decide what they're gaining matters, right? Right? Are they gaining something positive, I like to go back to the basic balance sheet, assets equals liabilities and shareholders' equity. Well, I get better off if my liabilities go down or my assets go up, or both, right? So when you're thinking about people gaining, where are you really impacting their personal balance sheet? Are they gaining skills, insights, wisdom, better behaviors? They stop beating their wife, they stop smoking, right? Over here on the liabilities decreasing, or maybe they're learning another language, or they're traveling and cultural, it could be anything, anything. But structure your thinking at the outset of really imagining what it is that individual, how their life is going to be improved in a very concrete and tangible way. Does that make sense? Then you can start to get to the question, well, who does gain the most? Who is most likely, if my gains are clear in terms of the product that I'm creating, right? People who have access to online and Twitter, people who obviously use the dwelling spaces that you're talking about. That's a certain cohort, a certain demographic. Then you could start to see, well, how will they benefit? Greater satisfaction with just-in-time, fundraising, perhaps some more enduring safety and security at the lower cost. Just rattling off, exactly. But this gives you a way of actually looking at what you're after and putting some rational framework around it so that you can quickly trade up if it's not good enough, or stop when it becomes so superior that you want it to be your next startup. Right. Does that make sense? Okay.
I just wanted to share something that's related to what you were saying that also relates to a conversation that Nadia had, that we had on the way over here, and that is that the other thing to know about yourself is know how much you're a startup person and how much you're a system implementer, maintainer person. And try not to beat yourself up if you're not both, right? That there are times, there are times where,
absolutely.
In the early days, I used to be really hard on myself because I'm a startup person. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I love the blank slate. I love starting. Like, nothing makes me happier than starting from nothing and building something awesome. I love it. But as soon as it gets to a certain state, I'm done. And I know that about myself. And I'm not a nasty critic of that element of my personality anymore, the way I used to be in my 20s and early 30s. So know whether you actually need that startup fire and find a partner that has it, or know whether you're the system builder or whether you're the serial entrepreneur. Just really be honest about your assets and your own liabilities, in terms of what you bring to a team, because it'll make you a lot happier if you're honest.
And it'll be more fun.
Yeah.
I was just going to ask, does anybody have a gain or an impact that they don't think could be made measurable? Yes? Someone? Anyone? Yes?
Vulnerability, like
Awesome.
in Daring Greatly by Brene Brown.
Say it again.
From the book Daring Greatly by Brene Brown.
Vulnerability. So that's a human disposition. Great. Would everybody agree? Is that easy to measure?
Yeah, I'm in econ class right now where we talk a lot about how happiness and utility can't really be measured through materialism, and how all these economic graphs don't really tell us too much about practical life. So that I think would be kind of difficult, but I think it's visible change. If you can see someone's happy and not just going through the motions, legitimately happy, then I think that's evident on a real level in life, I guess. But measurable, I don't know. But I think, at that point you don't have to measure it because it's actually done.
Cool. Well, the interesting thing about whether it's environmental change or social justice, vulnerability, or happiness, some of the awareness internal states or some of the great big macro environmental issues is the first question is, does everybody at least agree on what that is? So if you don't have agreement on what a sort of fuzzy conceptual abstract term is, then you're at a sticking point. And I say, well, you know what, that's okay. Let's just not worry about explicit agreement on what that is. Let's push it, as you were saying, out of awareness to a behavioral or a conditional state that we can all either agree or disagree is true. So for vulnerability or for happiness, I would say, what is it that a person who is less vulnerable can do that a person that is more vulnerable can't? Right? Yeah, exactly. Then I wouldn't choose the word vulnerability. I'd choose power. But so yes, exactly, and stay on the positive. But so you can always take a fuzzy term, or like say happiness. Well, what is it that a person who is happy can now do that a person who is unhappy can't? Or you could say, what is a condition in which an invulnerable person would find themselves where vulnerable people don't go, right? So you could drive any impact, social, personal, or group, or collective, to observable, evidentiary, clear, objectively measurable, and verifiable terms that then you have to go to the next step, get agreement on. Okay? So even if we do behavioral and conditional, you still have to have agreement on that. My first choice is to get agreement with the people who I'm expecting to have the gain. Is this ring true for you? So my first question to you is, do you think it's valuable to be able to answer what is my innovation on the Social Innovation Challenge? Raise your hand if you think that's a valuable gain. Not that many. I got to improve my product, right? You go down and you vet that, or who pays? So some people might value that and saying, you know what, knowing how to answer that question is absolutely important to me. Others might not. And it might be framing, or it just might be that you got the wrong audience. And you need to take that particular methodology and impact and insight somewhere else. So the challenge that we have is impact investing or social innovation, whatever. We're making up this as we go along. But we're doing it hopefully with open and explicit collaboration and willful preferential choice by everybody else we're involving. In other words, nothing's hidden. We're being as explicit as possible every step of the way. So people who need to benefit choose. Yes, it's better than doing nothing or my second worst option, right? Does that make sense at all? Is there anything that you don't think you can measure, Grace?
Well, I think you convinced me that we can measure most things. But what I'm concerned about right now is we're approaching a time boundary.
Oh, that is measurement, isn't it?
So I want to make sure that students get an opportunity to ask questions and engage their projects.
Please.
And obviously those who will need to leave at 2 can go, but others can stick around and get more coaching on their projects. But maybe we can open it up now for some questions from the audience.
So, I guess kind of 2 parts. Like, do you first consider like these impact companies less profitable than like a company that isn't really looking for impact?
So we're on the asset management side. We only invest in things that can give a market return, right? So in terms of asset management, we're really rigorous about our investments relating to market rate returns. On the impact investments we do with our profits, there's a whole continuum, right? We're doing some small scale pilots right now. We have 2 off the radar portfolio managers who have been, in essence, doing this not as Principium for the last 5 to 10 years. And you know, there's companies that have lost money. There's a company that did 10x. There's a company that did 20x. So there's a massive range, but by being the first money in, you can play an intrinsically important role in de-risking and leveraging. There's evidence that Roots Capital, for instance, levers about $33 for every dollar they put in to de-risk entrepreneurs. So there's a massively important role in even non-market investments in the space to catalyze change. So we kind of do it all.
And then do you look for almost like a ratio? I don't even know if this is measurable, but like the amount of impact versus kind of the amount of lost profit if they took a less impactful way.
I mean, so I come from a particular place in this world that believes you can have it both, particularly on the for-profit side, but not always. But I think a lot of the time you can have it all. On the not-for-profit side, I also think there's all kinds of things we need to invest in that will never turn a profit, and that's essential to invest in anyway. And I'm a Canadian, so I believe in public health care and lots of other crazy things.
I'm wondering if the impact measurements that you use focus mostly on what the impact that the company is intending to have, like if whether they're successful or not at that is all of the measurement, or if it also takes into account maybe the unintended side effects of a lot of these projects that are operating in really complex spaces. And so, like Tom's Shoes is an example. Do those metrics also take that into account?
That's a very sophisticated question. It's a good question.
If you're trying to do something good, but what you're doing has a negative impact elsewhere that is not intended, does not factor into the measurement.
Yeah, so microcredit is another really big example where there have been lots of microcredit projects that measured the number of loans they did and the percentage of repayments, but they didn't really ask very essential questions about the conditions of people's lives, right? Were women, mostly microcredit is going to women, were the women's lives actually better? And there were incidences, especially about 5 years ago, where a whole group of women in the microcredit world committed suicide because they were under such extreme pressure as the microcredit mechanisms were bought and sold and all kinds of things happened in the space. So unintended consequences, it's absolutely an essential piece to look at. So what we're trying to do is apply our metrics across the public and private markets as best we can, but we're particularly trying to instill the metrics into the DNA of the early companies we invest in. And we're trying to look for metrics. I mean, we're still a work in progress in terms of our metrics piece, that are really substantial in terms of positive impacts. And it's hard.
Yeah. Well, I would have to say yes. I think the challenge is whether or not people can understand and put together a framework that would account for that prior to investing or making it part of their portfolio decision making at the get-go, or a filter or what have you. But in all endeavors, there's the known unknowns and then the unknown unknowns and the black swans. So I think you have a responsibility, if you're a fiduciary, to certainly go back and report to investors any of the collateral damages, and then maybe net that out in some sort of rational way as a total return figure, without a doubt. But you can look at plenty of complex issues, whether it's climate change. One of my first investments was in a company focused on bringing new technologies in that would help us get better data, atmospheric data, and accelerate knowledge about climate change and yada yada. And so I looked all the way down the line, to 4th, 5th level effects, trying to understand how this would have an impact, what the intentions of the CEO and the executive were, where they wanted to go with it. And that all had to do with whether or not I felt that was the best competitive use of my money at the time. And it turned out it was, because it was 50x after 10 years. So I was like, yeah. But nonetheless, you don't always succeed in both understanding the scope of potential impact or finding out a rational way to account for it. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't try.
So just a quick follow-up on that. Do you find that companies that are established with that impact focus, rather than like a model that they're kind of stuck to, are more successful at recognizing those unintended side effects and then changing what they're doing? Are businesses or organizations flexible enough to do that, or do they mostly just die out and then they start something else?
So there's a big thing in this space around pivoting and reiterating and rapid prototyping. You'll hear all of this stuff. It's really, really important, right? You cannot get stuck, right? There's a fluidity piece that is very essential. Like all the companies I've watched grow and blossom, they weren't attached to the small stuff. They were really, really mission focused. They were really, really impact focused. They were really keeping their eyes on the essential pieces, and they let all kinds of things go. Pop and J used to be called Bliss. It had a completely different model 9 months ago.
Yeah.
And their new model is better and stronger and more robust and got them into anthropology.
And there's both. I mean, the majority is be nimble and cuddle. Absolutely, that's survivable. But it's interesting if you look at the data on all the unicorns, those companies who came out and launched and out at over $1 billion in valuation, the Facebooks and Twitter, they never pivoted. The same idea from the get-go. So maybe you hit it rich and you strike the lottery and then you go down there. But if you want to survive and be in this game long enough, then you got to pivot all the way until you get that one idea and that one opportunity where market conditions are right and everything works and makes you look like you're a genius, which is, I'd be happy to be stupid and made to look lucky any day of the week.
We actually I have to interject here. It's 2 o'clock or so. We can definitely continue the Q&A if our panelists will be willing to do that. We'll break the formal part here. But before we do that, and I know because many students, including I, have to go to a class at 2:30, I first of all want to acknowledge Sandra D'Souza, who's here from UC San Diego. Can you stand up and let's acknowledge her? Welcome here. She is with the Moxie Foundation Incubator, the Moxie Incubator at UC San Diego, and a very good partner with us. So we're glad to have you here, and we hope next time you can bring some UC San Diego students here. Great, thank you. Great to be here, have you here. And also, big thank you to Grace Michael, who did an awesome job today, I think, moderating this thing. So let's give her a hand. And Grace also was one of our winners last year in the Social Innovation Challenge. So she has some experience in navigating these waters. And speaking of experience, my gosh, what an awesome panel today. Thank you so much to Donna, Morton, and Hanna. Donna flew in this morning from Denver, and you can tell from her expertise that her time is extremely valuable. So we really value your coming here and appreciate your spending time with us. So thank you for that. And Rob, of course, again, always a pleasure to have you here.
I'm a junkie, man. I got to keep coming back.
Yeah, he's coming back. I also want to announce our Idea Lab 6 pitch deck coaching. So that's our next one, Tuesday, February 25th. Set your calendars for that. And should be an awesome Idea Lab. So also Nadia Och is in the back. So Nadia is the point of contact for many of you that are going to set up your Social Innovation Challenge ideas onto the platform. She and Grace both are often fielding your questions and your issues that come up. So thanks, Nadia and Grace and everyone. And again, thank you to our panelists, and hopefully they will stick around for the more informal part.
Yeah,
Thank
if you have any more questions, we're happy to sit up here or